Hello everyone, welcome to Freedom with Finance. Today I'll be talking about the eighth wonder of the world. Do you know what it is? Very soon you'll realize that. Bill Gates once was famously quoted saying, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what can be done in 10 years. So true is that. We always want to be like a millionaire in like 2 years, but we are underestimating that goal is actually achievable if we are more realistic, right? Even though you might be just having 10,000 riyals as your monthly salary, you can still dream about the 1 million riyal if you're not underestimating what time can do to investing. Another famous person who was quoted once saying is Mr. Albert Einstein, who said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, he who doesn't pays it, right? And this is not just true for personal finance, irrespective of whether you're even building your muscles, body muscles, or you're trying to learn a new skill, right? If you're able to give time to it and you're able to be consistent about it, then it works wonders. So let me show an example of this using a custom SIP calculator, which I built, right, to explain the story. The first section of this states some of the assumptions made about our lifestyle, about the returns that we should expect, etc. And the second section here will talk about what the returns would be year over year, and where we will see, how compounding comes into picture, right? And there are a few scenarios I have in mind which I wanted to discuss with you. So in terms of assumptions, I've assumed a monthly salary of 10,000 riyals, okay, of which 45% to 50% is your basic expenses, which would include your rent, your food, water, utilities, transport, comes out to 45%. Then I have separated another 20% for the wants, right? In terms of shopping, gifts that you have to buy, movies, etc. Now, another 10% has been removed for investments in other asset classes like gold, deposits, things like that, right? And finally, it comes down to 25%, which we are putting into a mutual fund equity class. Which mutual fund, etc., we will come to that in a separate video, which leads to a monthly SIP amount of 2,500 riyals. This is the first scenario which I want to consider, and let's see how this plays in the long term, right? In terms of the investments, there's also like, what is the return that I've expected from the mutual fund? I've put like 8%. Now, why 8%? I've been parallelly doing some research on the equity mutual funds on growth, which are available on Tadawul, right? And this is the list of few fund managers which I have considered. I'm still in the phase. I will bring this in a separate video later this month, right? But when I look at the SAB equity mutual funds, which I was very much interested in, the 5-year average return from them have been close to 16%. The 10-year return have been very close to 10%. And since inception also, this has been very close to the 10% mark. So roughly we can see, at least from this fund manager, the 4-5 funds that is there is giving around 9 to 10%. But for the conservative mindset, I have only assumed there 8%, right? Because there will also be some expense ratios, management fees, things, which I'm not considering at the moment. So assuming it's 8% before tax, okay, that's also, or before inflation also. So if we also factor in the 4% inflation, the real return would be also even less. Please do remember, always considering the inflation rate, which many a times we forget to do it. So always remember that back of your mind. Anyway, so that's first scenario, 2,500 riyals every month consistently deposited for 5 years. Ignore this top up person for now. I will explain that later. Now, invested years is 5 years, and we will play in another scenario, a bit longer duration, right? So two options are available in SIPs. One is where it's a simple SIP, where you're putting this irrespective of whether your salary increased, your lifestyle has changed, etc. You are consistently putting that same amount every year, every month. So that 2,500 riyals for 5 years means 5 into 12 into 2,500, which comes out down to 150,000 riyals. And that will give you a return of 184,000 riyals in assuming an 8% return in 5 years, right? This is close to around 7% annual compounded annual rate, right? Now, the second option is a top-up SIP system, where as your salary is increasing, why should you just fix your SIP to be 2,500? Let's say like next year, your salary has gone up to 12,000 maybe, right? Or after 3 years, it has become 20,000. So your SIP should also increase. So to factor in that, there is a top-up percent of 5%, which I've put in here, right? Which means that in year 1, you have 2,500. In year 2, you have increased it by another 125, which is 5% of 2,500 to make it 2,600, then 2,700, then 2,900, then 3,000, right? So slowly, as your salary is increasing, you'll also increase your top-up, right? In that sense, At the end of 5 years, you're invested 165K versus the 150K that you had in option one. But in versus 184, you're now getting 202,000 and not at any extra cost, right? Because your salary is increasing, right? And therefore I've factored in that. And 5% ideally can also go up as high as 8%, right? If your salary is increasing by 8-10%, you should systematically increase your SIPs also. Now, there are two ways of doing this top up. At least in India, your fund managers themselves give you an option to increase the top up. Very soon I'll share how to do that in Tadawul if possible, right? What I do is the second approach. It's more of a manual approach, but I prefer it that way. At the end of every year, I do an audit of my investments, right? Audit just to review where am I in terms of the goals, how much has been achieved, what should be the plan for next year, what should be the split between equity and debt for next year, etc., right? So I manually then close the existing SIP and start a new SIP in the same mutual fund, but with a higher amount, if that option is not provided, right? That's also something that can be done, which is something I have been doing, right? So with this scenario, 2,500 riyals alone has given you 202,000 riyals at the end of 5 years. Now let me take the second scenario. Now let's bring in compounding, because so far it's not that drastic increase, right? 165 put, 200K return, right? It's not drastic because compounding comes with time. You have to give time to it. So let's make this 5 to be 15. And you'll see that with the same 2,500, now it has become 450 and almost the returns have doubled to almost 900K. But in the same scenario with a top up, that at the end of 15 years, you have actually become a millionaire. You invested 640, you have become 1.2. So in less than 14 years, you actually, with a mere 2,500 riyals, you have actually touched the 1 million riyal mark in less than 14 years. Of course, I understand that this is 15 years is also, especially for expats, that can also be a challenge, right? But it is doable. Let me remind you again what Bill Gates mentioned, right? You're underestimating what you can do in the long run. That's what this is. You're underestimating what you, with a salary of 10,000 riyals, can achieve in the long run, close to 1 million riyals, right? Now, let me take a third scenario where your starting salary today is 25,000, right? And of course, if you higher salary also means there will be some changes to your lifestyle. So for simplicity, let me just update some of these, right? So let's say you're living in a 3,000 riyal rented house. Your expenses, you like to eat more. Let's say your utilities has come close to 1,000. Your transportation is close to 1,500 riyals, right? And therefore, it's becoming now 32%. Earlier, it was around close to 45%. But as I was saying earlier, right, as your salary increases, does not mean your basic expense will also increase in that same rate, because this is the basic, this is the bare minimum. And as you're growing, this will definitely not grow at that pace. That's the beauty of top up also. You will be having a larger corpus to start investing in. But of course, your expenses for wants will also increase for sure. That's the human psychology. You will now dream about an iPhone, a Mac, right? Or some fancy stuff. So instead of 20%, I'll just make this 30%, right? And your investment will also be in other ideally, depending on age. If you're young, I would like to keep 70-80% in equity and then 20% in debt funds, right? But just for simplicity, I'm putting your 15% just to be on the safer side. So your salary has increased, and therefore your investment has also increased to 5,700 riyals, right? And therefore, at the end of 15 years, you have invested, at the end of 15 years, you've invested 1 million, which comes down to 2 million at the end of 15 years. And with the top-up option, you have invested 1.5 million, but you're getting now 3 million, right? Almost 2.7 million is what you're returning. Again, as I was reminding you, there's nothing much has increased, right? Like 5,700 after 15 years has just become 11,000. And I'm pretty sure your 25,000 riyal salary would have become, if you're indeed on a good fast track, right? Your 25,000 salary will easily become, with inflation also into account, will easily become 50-60,000 riyals, right? So in that 60,000 riyals, putting 11,000 is nothing. It's close to nothing, right? So that's the power of compounding, and that's what simple versus top up. I would always recommend doing the top up SIP approach. Now let me take you the last one scenario, which I want to bring forth. If you're doing the top up, and you now also have a strong control on your expenses for wants. I'm not talking about the basic expenses. Maybe this basic expenses will further increase, right? Let's say now you're a bigger family, there are more people in your house, and therefore this goes to 3,500 riyals, right? But your utility should not increase drastically. I think it should be close to this, and maybe your salary, your transport becomes 2,000, right? This is fine. I don't want to reduce this because that's your lifestyle. That's the bare minimum that you have to factor in. But instead of this 30%, see the power if you have a strict control on your wants. If you're able to make this 10%, right? It has now become 9,000 instead of the 5,000, which we had earlier. You have invested for the same period. And remember, you had 2.7 million at the end of 15 years. Now you have 4.3 million at the end of 15 years just by controlling that once. I'm not saying it's easy to control it. Of course, the temptation to buy new stuff, fancy stuff will always be there. But if able to control, I just wanted to bring that. What's the power of that? Controlling your, your wants and your desires. There should be a few things that you will also always dream about. Otherwise, why are we earning? Why are we making money, right? I always dream about a specific car. I always dream about a specific laptop that I always want to have, right? That's what motivates us to work so hard. So that should always be there. But I just want to bring that picture, forth, right? How if you're able to control these elements in your lifestyle, that drastically changes the whole story. So summary is, start today, go for the long run, maximize what you can start investing today. That's what I wanted to cover today. Thank you so much for watching so far. If you want to continue learning more about Tadawul and also to follow up on the equity mutual funds and how do we compare, evaluate them, do press the like button, subscribe to the channel so that you will get immediate notification about the next upload. Thank you.